Hey, I hope you're having a good day. You know, the last time we met, we were talking about Nineveh. The book of Nahum addresses a word from the Lord to Nineveh. It's something that I had never noticed because most of my thinking about Nineveh has always been connected to Jonah and how God used him, even though he was reluctant, how God used him and how God used the message that he preached to bring repentance, to bring a change, to bring awakening to Nineveh. But now 150 years later, if you remember from our last little study together, 150 years later, same Nineveh, different prophet, his name is Nahum. It's the very first words in the book of Nahum that it is a word from God against Nineveh. What is it that has changed? And we also discovered that it's about 150 years or so between these two prophets. One has preached repentance and Nineveh has responded and they are right in their relationship with God, but the message of Nahum is not a message of repentance. It is a message of judgment. And there's a couple of verses, as I showed you in our last time together, there's a couple of verses here that I want to point out as to why judgment is coming to Nineveh. Chapter 1, verse number 9. The prophet Nahum is writing and he says, "What is it? What do you conspire against the Lord? He will make an utter end of it." And so there it is. Nothing that I do in regard to conspiring against him, anything against him, none of that is going to prosper. The Lord will bring an end to my actions against him. Skip over to chapter 2, verse number 8. What a descriptive verse. This one is one of those verses that just grabbed my attention because I want to ask, what does it mean? "Though Nineveh of old was like a pool of water, now they flee away. Halt, halt, they cry, but no one turns back." And so we read here a couple of things that it appears that the nation, the people, the empire of Assyria, the Assyrian Empire, in particular Nineveh, the people of Nineveh, the capital city, that they are conspiring against God. They are working against God. They're not working for him. They are against him. And the Lord made it clear, you're either for me or you're against me. And so they are conspiring against him. And then over here in this chapter 2, verse 8, the Nineveh of old was like a pool of water. Well, what is that about? Well, it's more than a body of water. In fact, it really has nothing to do with water. It's a picture of power. It's a picture of a pool of wealth, a pool of weapons, a pool of resources, a pool of people who had become enemies of surrounding nations and even had become enemies of God. But all of that is going to end because if this is a large pool, a lake, if you will, with no end in sight, imagine that lake, how large it is, and it's full of wealth and weapons and resources and people and enemies and conspiracies against God. All of that is coming to an end. If there is a dam that is holding all of this in place, it's as if God is poking his finger through the dam. It's as if everything is about to come to an end. There's a leak in the dam. Whenever I begin to conspire against God, there's a leak in the dam. God will not allow that. And so we see a lot of chaos today in the United States. We see a lot of chaos on different news channels, networks, all of them as a matter of fact. Just know that any conspiracy against God is not going to succeed. They had been a pool. Nineveh had been a pool of wealth and power and resources against God. But now we see panic. They had known prosperity and power, but now there's panic. In that chapter 2, verse 8, halt, halt, stop, stop. But they're not stopping. Those who have any sense at all about themselves are running for their lives. And then there's the cry from those who are against Nineveh: plunder the silver and plunder the gold. Why would they say that? There's a little bit of joy, the wrong kind, but the enemies of Nineveh are a little happy that what they've done to others is now coming back to them. They had plundered other nations, and now they themselves would be plundered. We talked last time about how does a person get away from God? And we talked about, well, gradually and then suddenly. How does a person turn their back on the church? Well, gradually and then suddenly. We talked about a slow fade. And just for a minute, I want you to think with me about a slippery slope, because they were on one. And it reminded me of that verse in Psalm 73:18. You have set them in slippery places. I just want to sound a warning to myself and anyone else that may need to hear it, that if I am on a slow fade, slowly, gradually drifting into complacency and unconcern, the next step may very well be a slippery slope. And men, there's so many. I don't have time in 5 to 7 minutes in these little videos to describe all of the slopes, but they are countless. In terms of spiritual things, in terms of economic things, in terms of political things, ungodly things in our marriages, our homes, and our families. Man, the slippery slopes, it seems, are countless. But in regard to the things of God, if I have been on a slow fade, it's like I heard preached years ago, weakness often leads to worldliness and becomes wickedness. And if I've been on a slow fade, the next step may very well be a slippery slope. Not only am I fading away, but now I'm slipping away. I'm drifting away. I'm turning away. I'm falling away. And some running away. Jonah knew all about that. This is Nineveh. They are on a slippery slope. Is there any grace for a nation like Nineveh? Is there grace for any man, woman, church? Is there grace enough for anyone that's on a slippery slope and their life is out of control? Because it appears that Nineveh is like a car on ice. They've been careening along now at about 50, 60, 70 miles an hour, and all of a sudden they're out of control. I've got to guard my own heart. Before I make any judgment about anyone that's in any position of power in this world, anyone that's protesting in any street about anything, I got to examine my own heart. Have I been on a slow fade? Have I become guilty of no longer pursuing the Lord and being interested in Him and having a heart and desire and a passion for the things of God? I may very well have one foot down a slippery slope. I need to remind myself, and I'll remind you, that my hope is built on nothing less than Jesus' blood and righteousness. Whenever I seek to please men, I am bound for destruction. Paul said those words, do I seek the favor of men, or do I seek to please men or God? If I pleased men, he said, I should not be the servant of Christ. I beg you, friend, today, this is a hard word, but I think it is a necessary word. I'm afraid that too many of our churches are slowly fading away from values and convictions and standards that they once held dear. And I'm afraid that many of us individuals are slowly fading away from our passion for God, a desire for His Word and to know Him. And I'm afraid that our nation is on a slow fade as well. But I'm really concerned that we're on slippery slopes. Oh God, that God might speak to us, that God might stir us, that God might awaken us. I remind you again from Nahum chapter 1, verse 7, the Lord is good. He's a stronghold in the day of trouble. If this pandemic has got you down, trust the Lord to lift you up. May God bless you.